Hi everyone, it's Brittany from the Carnegie Library and welcome to another edition of Crafting at the Carnegie. Today we are going to be making these super cute, colorful color block napkin rings. This is part of our Grab and Go Craft Kit program, so if you were able to snag one of our kits, awesome. You should have everything you need except a pair of scissors. If you weren't able to get one of those, if you're not local, that's totally fine. You can still do this craft. It's with some really easy to gather supplies. So the first thing you're gonna need is 4 shower curtain rings. And you're gonna want them to be clear. Now, some of the ones in the kits do have ridges, and I'll explain how to work around those ridges and different workarounds for those, but you do wanna get clear ones just in case any peek through your thread. Then you're gonna need, if you're gonna do multiple colors like I did, you're gonna need 3 skeins of embroidery floss, just basic embroidery floss. And I'm talking about the small ones, just like they come if you get like a big pack of embroidery floss. And that's available at just about any store these days. It's very popular. And then you're gonna need some kind of glue. I'm using a clear tacky glue. You could also use hot glue for this. That would work really well. Basically anything that's gonna dry clear and that's strong. And then I am using some Q-tips and a plate to put my glue on. If you have the kits, then you have the Q-tips and you already have your glue in a little cup, so you're good to go. Anything you want to put your glue on is fine. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is cut 4 feet of each of the colors you plan to use of your embroidery floss. And this is really long, so at points of this craft you may find yourself standing up to do it, and that's totally fine. Get you up and moving. So that's what I've done, and I've just lined them all up. And then you're going to take your shower curtain ring and go ahead and close it. And then you're gonna go to where the snap is and you're gonna glue it in one of 2 places, either right here or right here in the back side, because you want to be able to hide this part. And you're just gonna wanna glue them on together. So if you're using the tacky glue, then I start by just adding a good glob. It's gonna dry clear so we don't have to worry about it being shown. And we're gonna cover all this up with thread anyway. And then I kind of stick my thread in, where you can see that. And then I put another glob of glue on top until I make sure they're all coated. And you're gonna wanna let this completely dry. So this could take about 20 to 30 minutes. So it's a great idea to go ahead and start all of your napkin rings if you're gonna do them all in one day. And that way, once one is dry, the first one's dry, then they're all dry and ready to go, and you can just keep going. If you're using hot glue, it's gonna dry instantaneously. You just got to make sure that you don't burn yourself. But it's convenient, but we couldn't put hot glue in our craft kit, so that's why we're using this. Just a little bit more on that pink, so now you can see they're all coated in the glue, and I'm just going to set this down on the table. Be careful not to move my string. There we go, it's right here. I'm just gonna lay it to the side so it can just hang out for about 20 minutes. Now I just put a little dab of glue on my plate, which you can't see because it's clear. But make sure that you close up your little cup that we've given you, or you close up your glue, or don't put all of it on your plate because it will dry. This actually dries fairly quickly, and even if it's in a big clump. All right, I'll see you back in a minute. All right, so it's been about 20-30 minutes and our glue is mostly dry. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. And you can see I have my 3 colors here. Because I wanna cover this area first, I am going to start with the one that's the color that is furthest away, because I wanna wrap my other 2 colors, the pink and the orange, in with the green, which is gonna make sense when I do it. So I'm just gonna start by just looping, and then I usually just put my finger over here to hold it. And it's a little hard when you start because your string is so long. But the reason we do that is so you aren't constantly having to stop and glue. And I'll explain to you how to do that if you run out of string, but it just makes for a cleaner look. So that's why. And we're just gonna push the pink and the orange string, or whatever color you're using, to the side. And then loop our green thread around that to cover it up. So you want to put your thread very close together, so at least in the front no one can see that pink or orange. And getting started is the hardest part. Really, this starts to come together pretty quickly once you're in the middle of it. Just this first little part when you're trying to cover the colors and get through these ridges takes a little bit of time. But you could definitely get these together in an afternoon if you're having a get together and you want to make some. This is great to just have these on hand with all the colors. You can buy embroidery thread, so cheap, and then you can make them for whatever theme you're having. If you're doing 4th of July or Christmas, or these remind me of like Cinco de Mayo or summer colors, the ones I'm using. That way you just already have them, and they're so inexpensive, because napkins can be kind of pricey, and let's be honest, how often do we use them? Okay. So I'm going to take my 2 strings I'm not using right now, that's my orange and my pink, and I'm just going to put them to the side so my green may catch them. And I'm going to keep going. And it's important to keep a finger on what you've already wrapped around, just to keep them nice and tight. So if you have issues with arthritis or something like that, you may want to do this in small spurts. If you have issues with arthritis, you may want to do this in small spurts just so it doesn't hurt your hand. Okay, now is the tricky part. So as you can see, there's a little ridge here and it's not wanting to stay. So what I found works well is if you kind of build up your thread. So it's going to use a lot of this color, and that's okay. But basically you're trying to get your thread almost even to that loop. And if you got the kits with the craft rings that have the ridges, that's the same thing that you could do. So you could do 2 options. You could either just put thread in between the ridges, which would look really cool because you'd have a clear and then a color, or you can wrap around your thread, build it up high enough, and then you should be able to cover your ridges just like I'm about to do here. So now that it's built up some, I can go ahead and cover up that ridge, and it may look a little clunky. You can see here it's a lot thicker, but that's okay because this is the bottom of my napkin ring, so no one's gonna see that. This is the part that's gonna show up, and then they're gonna take it off and no one's gonna know any the wiser. So it is okay if you're like, oh man, I'm using a lot of string. You should have plenty in your kit. So again, I'm just holding it, especially where it's kind of tricky to stay on, and wrapping it around pretty quickly. I'm sure the speed has nothing to do with it, until it's nice and covered. Just like it is now. See that? There you go. So I go about, I don't know, 2 inches, and I like to start a new color. So to start a new color, let's see, we'll do the orange next. I'm gonna bring it through. I'm going to loop it around my other 2 colors again to lock those in place. And start doing the same thing. So because I have another ridge on this side, I have to build up that thread again. So probably 1 more and I'll be ready to go. So see how I filled in that gap there? And that's exactly what you'll do in this main part if you have the ridges. So I'm starting to cover that, and again, I'm just using my thumb and holding it on the side so it's nice and tight together. And as long as you do this pretty tightly, it will stay. And you can always use your nail and push it back together. And as I go through, as you can see, I have my other 2 colors over here. I'm going to wrap my orange thread around those along the back side of my ring. That way I don't have a long string going around. It's not the end of the world if you do. It's a great way to conserve string, but it just looks for a more professional look. It gives you a more professional look if you do. So you can see right here where I'm covering the pink and green string, and it's so thick and dark you can't see it, even though it's on the side of my ring. And just keep an eye on the string because it Hey there, electricity. Just keep an eye on the string because it may want to bunch up on you while it's really long. So I finished with my orange section now. Now it's time to add my third and final color. So I've just put my orange threads so they're all on the same side of the ring. There we go. So now I'm going to grab my pink thread. And I'm still holding on to that orange thread, and I'm going to start looping it around, making sure it's grabbing that orange and green thread as it goes, so it's covering it up. And again, just moving my thread, my thumb over to hold the thread. And through. And you can see on the side there, you can't really see it. You can move that thread over and just make sure it's nice and tight. And we can even go back through and cover up that orange if that green we wanted to. So we're just gonna keep this process, go all the way around the ring. Again, just grabbing the next color, making sure you're holding it tight and covering up these strings on this side when it's time to change colors, and then I will see you back when it's time to finish it. This is a really fun process. I know it can be a little stressful at the beginning, but just relax, put on a show, put on a good podcast, a great audio book, and just hang out. It's a lot like embroidery or something like that. So just relax, it's really easy. Upstairs away from my desk, so I don't have to wear my mask anymore since I'm all alone. And it's time to finish up our napkin ring. So you may have noticed in that fast motion sped up video that now that I'm coming to the end, I'm actually gonna be able to probably wrap up almost all of this pink thread. So I'm not gonna have to worry about gluing that part. Now I haven't found out yet if I'm gonna have enough of the green string to go completely around to meet my other part of the green string. And that's okay, and it looks like I'm not. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start here because I can't stop here because I can't wrap it around fully enough. Now, if I wanted to finish this off with green, what I would do, I know this isn't green, but this is what I have by me, I would cut about 1 foot of my embroidery thread, and I would simply glue it where I stopped my last thread, point it in the direction of my other threads. Let me see if I can get you all to see that. And just allow it to dry. And that's okay, especially if you have the ones with ridges where you're gonna have to use more thread because you've gotta build it up so it can cover those ridges. You may have to do that, but you may have enough without doing that. So it's really easy. It'll just end up being, you can cover that up when you start wrapping it, so it'll just end up being a little lump. Let me see if I have any. This one was really smooth. Maybe right here was one. So it's just a little lump. You would never even notice it, so don't stress about that. But I'm not gonna do that with here because I'm okay having a little bit of orange at the end, and I have so much nice thread here, I think I'm just gonna go with that. So I'm gonna get my thumb back in place, and I think a loop came undone. That's why I gotta have my thumb here. If you saw me wagging my hand, waving my hand around, wagging like a dog, well, I was just giving myself a handbrake. Please take hand breaks, stretch it out, move it. It's just one of those things that can kind of hurt. So just do the best you can. All right, let's go ahead and add in this orange. So again, I'm making sure it is covering that green thread, and they're wanting to fray now because they're at the end. So they're like, woo, free me. So we're just gonna keep them to their side. We're gonna finish up with some orange, which I actually think is gonna look very nice. So I was looking at this and I was like, oh, I wouldn't mind some more orange in there. You could totally do this. We're doing color blocking today, but you could do every other string or like only wrap it around 3 times and then do it. You could make these stripes so much thinner. You could do a solid color. You could do half and half. So many options. These would actually be really cute for a wedding, like a DIY, if you're willing to invest the time. But if you're doing a DIY wedding, then you probably are. So what I'm gonna do now, as you can see, I have a little bit of like a lot of colors right here. Here we go. I'm just gonna clean that up. And that's what I was telling you. You could always fix just about everything at the end. So since I have some extra string, I'm just gonna clean that up so it looks like a nice smooth transition from my orange to my green. And I'm just gonna make sure I'm tucking these extra threads behind so they aren't shown in the end and I can just glue them. So I think that is about it. Okay, so I'm gonna hold it very tightly and I'm just gonna snip my edges as close as I can. Then I'm just going to secure my last strings with a little bit of glue. So your glue may have hardened on one end of your Q-tips. You can just flip it around if that happens. We're just gonna kind of glob it on there and smooth it out so it looks nice, making sure all those little individual strands are covered and that it's nice and tight. So I'm gonna hold this with my thumb so it's nice and tight. And then I'm gonna add my glue. And you can kind of move your threads around with your Q-tip so it lays a little bit nicer. Depending on how short you were able to cut them, will depend on how easy or hard this is. And I always like to add extra because, like I said, you really can't see it from the front. It's just gonna help it stay better. Get some of this excess off. And there you go. See how nice that looks when we build it up? See how nice that looks where we built it up? So you can't even tell those transitions. So I'm just gonna let this hang out and dry and then it'll be ready to use.